Well, coming up on today's show, Tesla takes almost half of the entire plug-in car sales in the USA. The first complete FF91 body in white is ready from Faraday Future. And BMW to build a €1 billion electric car factory in Hungary. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening wherever you are in the world. Hello and welcome to the Wednesday the 1st of August edition of EV News Daily. It's Martyn Lee here with the news you need to know about electric cars and the move towards sustainable transports. Wednesday the 1st of August today is going to see the Q2 earnings call from Tesla after the closing bell, and what with the time difference, I make this programme in the UK, if you hadn't sussed from the funny accent by now, that it's going to be a little bit of a rush to get this processed in terms of what it all means, just to let you know how this week is going to pan out. But talking of Tesla, Mark Kane for Inside EVs brings us today's first story, because in June, Tesla sold around 11,362 electric cars in the US, according to the estimations, which, by the way, have been scarily accurate from Inside EVs. And that's enough to achieve a new record share for the plug-in market. Mark says that, believe it or not, 45% of all plug-in cars sold last month, over 25,000 were Teslas, and that's when you include plug-in hybrids as well, limiting it to pure BEVs, by the way, which is about 14,500. Tesla really dominates the market at 78% of all pure electric cars. Well, the great unknown for now is how many Model 3 sales they will be chalking up every single week at the moment. Production hit 5,000 a week of the Model 3 in the final week of the last quarter, but they often slip back after that as people take leave and holiday, and we will find out how quickly they've got back to 5,000, maybe even on the earnings call, if they particularly want to share that more recent information. Elon immediately announced 6,000 is the next milestone. That's 6,000 Model 3s per week. I mean, the guy is non-stop, isn't he? Imagine working at Tesla night and day to hit the target, and then the CEO says, oh, by the way, your next one's here already. Here's the new target. I mean, he's relentless in a kind of in a good, positive way, though. In the first 6 months of the year, this year, 2018, an estimated 124,500 plug-in cars have been sold in the US, according to Inside EVs. So, 6 months of the year remaining then, from July to December, if you put the Model 3 down at 20,000 a month, and if you revise that downwards for the odd factory shutdown to upgrade General Assembly lines, if you revised it upwards because that ramp up the S-curve is increasing, and if you totally discounted S and X models as well from Tesla, they would still be making 120,000 Model 3s between now and the end of the year, and that is going to massively skew those already skewed figures, talking about how much the market they are dominating. And I do get the occasional, and by the way, the comments, the internet's a rough and tumble place, but for some reason, you listening to this podcast, even when you have a different opinion to maybe some of the listeners' comments that I read out, or even my opinion, everyone is super nice in the comments, the emails. It's a really wonderful community. So even when I get an email saying, you're kind of doing a bit too much Tesla news at the moment, why do you do that? It's because of their scale, just because in the next 6 months they could well do 120,000 Model 3s alone. Maybe more, maybe less, but you can't ignore that scale. Well, talking about how they're going to make even more of them somewhere closer to you, they do want gigafactories on every continent to make that shipment to your front door shorter. Elon said that they were looking at Europe for Gigafactory 4 by the end of the year, and that was at the shareholder meeting. It's the Wall Street Journal in the last day that has run with an article to say they're currently in talks with the authorities now in Germany and the Netherlands to build the first European gigafactory, and they cited officials involved in the matter. So there's no surprise there, really, because Elon announced that already, but there's a little bit more to the story now. According to Sonam Rai for Reuters, Tesla already has an engineering division in Pruim in Germany. That's about 30 k's from Belgium, about 100 kilometres from the French border. All future gigafactories, such as this one, which I guess would be called Giga 4, a bit like the previously announced Gigafactory 3 in China, is going to be used to produce both the batteries and the cars themselves. No more splitting that process up, all going to be done under one very large roof. Well, a company that's a little bit behind many of the other EV makers is Faraday Future. They've had a bumpy run, I think it's fair to say. But Faraday Future announced today that the first complete body-in-white for the FF91 has arrived at the Hanford factory. That's effectively the first structural frame, if you like, without anything bolted onto the frame. It's kind of the welded structural frame. Well, the senior VP of manufacturing, Dag Reckhorn, said this, and I quote, "There's no question that this team and our suppliers have faced many significant challenges in getting the FF91 to this point, and even slightly ahead of schedule. This is a really huge accomplishment over the past 2 years, all while focusing on the true luxury and quality of the final product." End quote. Well, the order book for the FF91 early users, they have been dubbed FF Futurists, have been open since the start of the year. First deliveries, this is the bit that rang the bell for me, and maybe you could say the alarm bell for me. First deliveries of the FF91 this year. Well, there's only 6 months of the year to go, and they've got a structural frame, a welded frame of one car built. Prototypes have been testing, of course, and it's a company that have had many challenges and many ups and downs, and the fact that they're still going is a credit to them. But all the best with it. Well, BMW said it's investing €1 billion, that's about 1.17 billion US dollars, in a new car factory in Debrecen, in Hungary, capable of building electric cars. The plant's going to have production capacity of 150,000 cars every year, so a good size, and it's going to be capable of making both electric and ICE vehicles. BMW said it's going to help the car maker expand its manufacturing capacity in Europe, where 45% of its cars are sold, and of course any production facility in somewhere like Hungary is going to have lower costs than making it in somewhere like Germany. Well, how about we do a little trucking special? I've been saving up a few trucking stories for you because the thing that I like to say, it's not my line, by the way, it's Tony Sieber's, but it's about electrifying miles, not necessarily vehicles, and these trucks that will do 500,000 miles, if not more in their lifetime, some of them on the roads on different shift patterns, 24 hours a day, can make a really big impact. You change one truck and you can have a big positive impact on the emissions of maybe 4 or 5 or more personal individual cars that sit on your driveway or outside work for most of the time. Well, UPS announced today a collaboration with Thor Trucks to develop and test a fully electric Class 6 delivery truck in Los Angeles in California. The truck is expected to be ready for deployment later this year. The Thor EV delivery truck is going to have a range of 100 miles and be powered by Thor-designed and built batteries. They're going to be lightweight, durable, and allow for long-range driving distances. For the next 6 months, UPS is going to test the medium-duty electric delivery truck as part of its fleet of test vehicles. Testing is going to include things like off-road evaluation to address durability, battery capacity, technical integration, engineering, and any items found during on-road testing. Depending on the success of the deployment, UPS may well purchase more of the vehicle. They use a rolling laboratory approach over at UPS. They've got about 9,300 low-emission vehicles to determine which technology works best, not only for them, but for each route. And they are quite tech-agnostic, and they'll use the best technology for the best use case. And that includes pure electric, hybrid electric, hydraulic hybrid, ethanol, compressed natural gas running on CNG, and LNG, liquefied natural gas, and propane as well. I'll put a link to that article in the show notes for you. Well, Daimler are moving forward with electrifying not just their cars, but their vans and their trucks as well. Mercedes is going to start testing prototypes of a fuel cell powered Sprinter van, and that's going to be called the F-Cell, like the GLC with the same suffix. It draws electricity from either the hydrogen stored in cylindrical tanks in the underbody or a small battery pack that can be charged externally, according to FleetEurope.com. That makes the Sprinter F-Cell the first plug-in hybrid zero-emission van ever, which is kind of a mouthful, I suppose, but it is a plug-in hybrid. It's got a battery, but it is also zero emission because it can run on hydrogen, combining electricity produced in the fuel cell and the current that is stored in the battery. Well, there is a problem, however, the lack of hydrogen fueling infrastructure at the moment. That's why Mercedes has added the battery pack. It's a relatively small one. It only extends the range by a mere 30 kilometres, but they say it will suffice to get you to the next hydrogen pump. I would ask how many hydrogen pumps are just 30 kilometres apart. Certainly where I'm sitting at the moment, they're way more than 30 kilometres apart. Maybe in California, they're closer together, but of course there is that big news story that's going on at the moment. They've all run out of hydrogen. There's a supply problem, so no one can fill up their cars, as far as I can understand, from halfway around the world. But the posts that I've been following online look like there's a big old shortage with delivery and an issue somewhere. So it's an interesting concept for Daimler to take and not follow, for instance, the Tesla semi-truck model of just going all in with pure electric trucks. Another maker that's pinning their hopes on fuel cells is Toyota, and the third of 4 truck stories that we'll bring you today. Toyota is strengthening, they say, their pursuit of zero-emission freight with the unveiling of a new and second-generation hydrogen fuel cell heavy-duty truck. It can do 300 miles on a full tank. The new Beta vehicle was presented to the media and industry leaders at the Center for Automotive Research in Michigan. Well, the Alpha truck that came first, that had a 36-ton gross combined weight capacity, so it's a big truck, and driving range of 200 miles on the fill-up. 2 Mirai fuel cell stacks and a 12 kilowatt-hour battery supported an output of 670 brake horsepower on that. The new project portal Beta maintains these power and torque figures, same as the Alpha model, but it's got longer range. So extended range, adding 100 miles to that, and improvements in other performance metrics. And our final truck story today is all about Workhorse. The Workhorse Group today provided an update on milestones achieved during their own ongoing real-world pilot testing of its NGen all-electric trucks. The NGens demonstrated a fuel efficiency expressed in the miles per gallon equivalent, MPGE, that averages 40 MPGE for its 450 cubic feet electric van and 75 MPGE for its 200 cubic foot electric van. That is a 500% improvement in efficiency over their normal delivery vans. More than 100,000 packages have now been delivered by Workhorse employed drivers and delivery associates, offering invaluable insights to optimise the NGen production vehicle and the design for the kind of the last mile delivery applications. So 4 truck stories in a row, 4 different ways of doing it. There's Workhorse that are going down the pure EV route, UPS, which are testing the Thor trucks, they're fully electric in Los Angeles, and then you've got Daimler and Toyota that are pursuing fuel cell vehicles. And whereas I am negative on fuel cell vehicles for personal transport, I think it's crazy to look at hydrogen vehicles for cars, at least. I think it makes a lot of sense for things like trucks, buses, ships, anywhere that you can have that infrastructure. I think being persuaded that we should stay with the current system of having to take your car somewhere to put fuel in it, where a handful of gatekeepers of very rich companies that hold all of the economic influence, the political influence as well, a handful of large companies that make the hydrogen and then sell it to you at a certain place, I think that is bonkers. I think with EVs, more and more, when you get one, more and more people are realising, hang on, if I put some PV on my roof, or even if I can go to a public charging station, I can get electricity from there, rather than having to be beholden, as we are at the moment, to a handful of very large oil companies that, I think it's fair to say, in the past haven't always acted in our best interests. Well, finally, 2 more stories, actually, because I want to mention Harley. We always talk about cars on this show, but Harley-Davidson, the electric motorcycle, has been a long time coming. First announced as something called Project Livewire. It was 4 years ago. That bike has gone through some design changes, as well as becoming one of the only electric bikes the company plans to release over the next few years. Finally, though, looks like the Livewire project is going to be available next year. 2019, according to Engadget, is when we'll find our first Harley-Davidson electric motorcycle on the market. The first in a broad, no-clutch, twist-and-go portfolio of electric two-wheelers designed to establish Harley as the company as the leader in electrification of motorcycles, and they're going to have some catching up to do from a few other companies, like Zero Motorcycles, perhaps the most well-known, who've got a bit of a head start on them technology and brand awareness-wise, although the Harley name, of course, is legendary. We'll see if they can pivot to a new powertrain. And finally, home improvement retail giant Kingfisher, who own B&Q, have announced earlier on today it's going to install energy storage facilities at one of their really big distribution centres. For translation, by the way, B&Q, if you're in the USA, is Home Depot. These enormous warehouses that just have everything in for your house and your home projects. Currently, around 35% of the power generated by a big solar panel installation they've got there on their big distribution centre is exported back to the grid because it's all surplus. But the energy storage facility is going to be completed this September. It's going to enable B&Q to store up to 40% of the energy generated by PV and release it back into the building when they need it during peak pricing. In addition, they're also going to use that stored energy for in the battery installation for new electric vehicle charging points. So this is in Swindon in the UK, and they're going to install some EV chargers in the car park of their centre, and you'll be charging your EV off their stored solar power. That is fantastic. The local B&Q store, to me, which is here in somewhere called Poole in Dorset, they have one EV charger out the front of the store, and for as long as I can remember, there's just been a handwritten sign on it saying out of order. And even when it was working, you would have to plug your electric car in and then walk all the way into the store, walk round most of the store to get to the checkouts, find someone who knew what you were talking about and say, "Can you turn the electric car charger on, please?" And they'd have to flick a switch inside the store. I'm not making it up. So it's fair to say it was never used too much, because who can be bothered to then go on a big old trek to track down a member of staff who even knows that there's an electric car charger somewhere in their car park, and then to find the flip switch, the isolation switch, somewhere inside the store. Well, let's get into the community section of the podcast today then. Thank you so much for the messages, the comments on the YouTube channel, and the feedback that I've had over the last couple of days. Sorry I've not been reading these out, but the show's been a little bit packed, and I want to keep the show down to a reasonable length because I really appreciate your time, and I know that you are busy. Well, thank you very much to Mike Perham, who sent me a note yesterday to say, "I heard your comment on yesterday's podcast about emailing out the show notes. Your site has an RSS feed, which people can subscribe to. If they use an RSS reader, they can subscribe to your feed and will automatically get updates. Your feed is generated by WordPress. No email or additional work is needed on your part, but your readers need to be savvy. Thank you, Mike." So yeah, I tried this out with the sort of the newsreader that I use, which is called Feedly on my iPhone. And indeed, it does work if you search for EV News Daily. But I agree with you, Mike. It's a bit techie. It's a bit geeky. It's a little bit, you've got to know what you're doing with RSS feeds and stuff. So that's a good halfway house, at least for now, if anyone wants to get the show notes on their RSS feed. But I do think like an email subscriber list would be a super cool thing to do if I could automate it and have no extra work, because this has already taken up hours of my day to research and write. Hi to Peter Mooney, who sent me an article from Focus magazine, and it's all about Toyota supporting and sponsoring a new hydrogen-powered ship, and it's on a 6-year voyage around the world. Now that is a heck of a voyage. Travelling for 6 years around the world, and they're powering themselves on carbon-free hydrogen produced from the seawater it is sailing in. It's got solar panels all over the ship and 2 wind turbines. It creates hydrogen, they say, by removing salt and ions from the seawater before separating out the oxygen and hydrogen through electrolysis, and then it's stored in tanks. In fact, it's going to turn up as well at the 2020 Olympic Games as a bit of a showpiece. Thank you very much, Peter, for sending that on. Hi to Rod Drury, who sent me an episode of the NZ Electric Vehicles podcast on electric-powered planes, and gave me the name of somebody who we could be interviewing on a future show. Thank you very much. An article that's been doing the rounds lately was from the newspaper Guardian, here in the UK, and William Clark forwarded the article on, and it was about one of the journalists who took a Tesla and took a long journey in the UK here, but didn't use superchargers, wanted to use the rest of the infrastructure needless to say, had a fair bit of kickback from the EV community because the journalist made life harder for themselves than they needed it to be, but didn't make clear in the article, there's an easy way to do this, and that's using superchargers. And there are other easier ways. You know, if you're a Polar Plus member here in the UK, which is one of the charging memberships you can be part of, that would be easier because you're already part of a certain tariff that you've paid for. But he wanted to go out and trial the different charging providers, different ways of like tapping with your contact lists and all those kind of things. And needless to say, it wasn't the most glowing report for electric cars. And I won't join in with the criticism, but I've seen him take a fair bit of stick from people making pretty fair comments, actually. Well, thank you very much for all of those emails. They were sent to hello@evnewsdaily.com. That is hello@evnewsdaily.com. Well, like I say, we'll get on to the Tesla earnings call later in the week when I fully digested that on at least Thursday, at least the top line on Thursday's episode, if I possibly can. Thank you very much for listening today. There are 197 previous episodes of the podcast on all the usual podcast places and on YouTube as well. The audio goes on. Plus the blog at evnewsdaily.com. If you subscribe, well, then you get the show first and free and automatically. If you could do me like one favour in return for getting the podcast, that would be share the podcast with somebody you know, either on your socials, whether you have a Facebook or a Twitter, or you're part of a forum or a group. If you could just post this, share it with people. If they find it as useful as other people do, then you and I can both help spread the word about electric cars. In the meantime, say hi on the socials by searching EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you tomorrow.